There we go. There we go. And then I will have, there we go. I'm just going to say, see, my baby brain is taking the weirdest shape, folks.
I manifested that. Yeah, press record on purpose. So,
Okay, so start again. So we're going to feet on the floor.
ground. So we're going to take just going to lengthen through the crown of the head. So really lengthen up through that spine. Just softening the gaze or closing the eyes, I prefer. And you're just going to visualize a box of equal length going up the line of the box, across the box, down the box, and then down the bottom. And all we're going to do is breathe up for the count of 4, hold your breath for the count of 4, breathe out for the count of 4, and hold our breath for the count of 4. So just taking one nice big deep breath in together. And then as we breathe out, just kind of let all the air out. And away we go. So we're going to inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, and up. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, 4, and hold. 2, 3, 4 in your own time. And hold. And out. And hold. And up. And hold. And out. And hold. And then just come back to your normal breathing, taking a little reset. Just noticing.
It was the fourth one. It was the fourth one that I found it all let go. It was
Yeah.
incredible. So the longer that you do it, it was great. It's kind of still in there going, and then it was like, whoa.
And here we go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So it's such an amazing rapid reset, you know.
And that's
seconds.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
'cause we would have been doing that for what?
Oh,
30 seconds, not even that, maybe a minute.
Yeah, about a minute. But that can really just reset the physiology, which takes the thinking brain out of it,
Yeah.
which often men are quite analytical and they want to problem solve everything. So this is a really beautiful way.
So it brings you back into your body.
Brings you back into the body, but it also from a physiological level gives you more of what you need to then be able to see more
So
clearly.
that more oxygen.
Yeah.
Does that have a cortisol kind of impact?
Yeah, well, it reduces the cortisol
Yeah.
in our body.
Yeah.
Most of us breathe really shallow. Most of us get woken up by an alarm, which sets off even more cortisol in our body. Our cortisol is the highest in the morning anyway, and then we go and have some coffee and we plug more cortisol.
On a
into that.
dehydrated body normally. Yeah.
And so therefore by 12 o'clock we're already pretty stacked.
We're jacked up, and then we go out for lunch, so we cuts us off on the traffic, and then
Yeah. And the other thing I find really interesting with guys is, because there's pressure at work and it's pretty intense, and then often they're coming home to family and the kids.
Well, they're walking in at
the
chaos
partners,
time, aren't they?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then often, again, I'm generalising, assuming people have got families, but the wife will be knackered, and so she wants a bit of time out, and there's this real kind of dance, and it's no wonder they're feeling tapped out. So using something like breath work, one of the first things I'll get people to do is to take off their work cap, if you like, imaginary work cap, and do a round of box breathing before they come into the house, put their dad cap on, so they're fully present.
What a
for the children.
handy. Yeah.
cool.
So is that a, like, if you were commuting, is that a when you like drive the car into the driveway thing?
Yeah,
or is
just
that a, like, as you, I don't know, sit on the bus to go home? Like, where would you
Yeah,
normally see people like practically injected into that?
You
Day.
wouldn't want to do any of it driving. So
Yeah.
my husband, it's great. He'll pull up and you see him, he just sits in the car, and
Okay,
he
yeah.
just does a round of box breathing.
Nice.
Then
Yeah.
other people, I'm stealing this from a mate of mine actually who's in the police force, but he used to touch one of his trees before he came in. So it's that
Yeah. So I've
connection with
pulled into
nature.
the driveway kind of thing. Yeah.
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 You can use box breathing anywhere. I used it just before I came on here,
Yeah,
just to set on my
nice.
nervous
Yeah.
system down instead of looking at my phone when I'm in the waiting room, just
Yeah.
to do a round of box breathing to bring myself into the body.
It's such a good tip.
I love it.
And it's interesting
Yeah.
because I was talking to a friend yesterday about our phone addictions,
Yeah.
and I was talking about, is it mental or physical? And I think for a lot of people it can be a
Right.
mix of both. You're like because I can see when people,
Yeah.
you know, like with coaching, you can see people kind of get the itch to reach. And imagine if we could retrain our systems to be like, oh, I've got the itch, I'm the box breathe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Imagine.
Yeah.
We wouldn't, you know,
So
we wouldn't
cool.
be so comparisonitis-y.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
and
wow.
phones, that's a whole other podcast.
We'll have you back and we'll do the phone addiction one.
Yeah, but you know, so just I can't remember even what the question was, but box breathing is something like one of my biggest go-tos, and that's the one that like consistently comes back as oh my gosh, that's been game changing.
So like just perfect,
Yeah.
quick win. Just
Totally.
I mean, you know, because it's
Researching.
something that you can just do straight away and it takes no time and it
Yeah.
costs nothing.
No, that's right,
There's
absolutely.
no,
It's
it's
free.
not like, oh, I'm gonna. Anna's recommended I go running, so now I've got to go and get new gear and get trainers and do all the stuff. It's like, oh, I just got to use my nose and my
Yeah,
mouth,
yeah,
my
totally.
lungs. Yeah,
I can totally see how too with the men, you know, they've been at work all day under pressure, you know, they leave in the morning, things are busy in the house, at work all day, and this is stereotyping. This is
Yeah, of
obviously not
course.
every man's role. And then, but they've driven home and they haven't had a chance for the break.
Yeah.
So they've
or
driven
even
home
worse,
straight
or
into
even worse, you're
the
working at home.
family.
Yeah.
You know, because
Yeah.
I've seen a massive difference in my other half. He's now off on paternity leave, lucky him, which is amazing. But I noticed a massive difference because when he used to drive into the office, he'd have podcast decompression time, and he doesn't have that. Like he would literally, like the boys would be banging on the door because they'd know it was dad finish time, and so he literally got no separation, and I could see that was taking a toll. But I've got a British other half who's male, and so you've got the compounding stiff upper lip, male,
absolutely.
ex-RAF,
Yeah,
so you've got
there we
all
go.
that, you've got all the like
Yeah.
little slices. Luckily he's also very self-aware, so but I saw a difference. So his demarcation was go and get changed into home clothes,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so
I do that
and
all the
because
time.
you've got to have a demarcation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if
Taking
you
off
can-
that hat and I'm putting on that
and
hat.
if you can put around a box breathing in there, I could see that would just be such a rapid practical win that everyone's going to benefit from.
And they even do it a little bit longer than what we.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
we just
so
did a little snippet,
yeah,
didn't we? But-
tiny. If you can kind of do 2 minutes worth,
Yeah.
or
2
up
minutes,
to 5
wow,
minutes would be
okay,
amazing, but
yeah.
most people freak out. 5 minutes, what do you mean? So we start very small with making things like any change. You want to make it small, very easy.
Absolutely.
So breathing is probably the first thing we look at, and then working out, well, what was game changing for me is realizing that actually all of my thoughts aren't real. I was like, what do you mean? And that's massive.
Yeah, it is.
I'm
It
like,
is.
oh, so I don't have to go and do that. Right, okay.
Yeah.
If I'd have known that in my teens and 20s, I would have had much less drama in my life.
Yes, your thoughts come and go just in the moment, eh? Then they
Yeah.
don't define you. They don't define you.
And so that can be game changing for people, is to understand that just because you have the thoughts doesn't mean it's true.
Yes.
And then being able to break that down
Yes.
is really beneficial for people. And then working about what beliefs are sitting underneath that thought in the first place. And so certainly for me, when I was at school, I had the belief that I was fat, ugly and thick. That was my narrative for like from the age of 6 probably. And I reinforced that narrative. I failed all my exams, and so, and so the ripple effect of that meant that I created my reality based on one belief or 2 beliefs. And had I had the tools that I have now when I was 15, my life would have been different, very different. And the way I responded to that and that narrative would have been different. So that's really cool when you get when you get one-on-one coaching with people and they go, oh, wow, I have to believe that
I'm
about
not
myself.
this. I'm not this.
that.
Yeah.
So where did that? How did that trigger? Is it a comment from another kid that's just been thrown?
What with
triggers it?
my thick
With your
thing?
when you're 6.
Yeah, well, I remember being told that I was ugly when I was 6 from a very important person in my life at the time. And
was it a throwaway comment? Do you
really
can you
just,
remember or you can't
I
remember?
do remember. It was my brother, and I loved him.
Yeah.
He's 6 years older than me,
yeah.
and I just thought
He was your
bomb.
idol.
And I was bridesmaid at my sister's wedding, and I took the dress off, and that was it. And I don't think I ever wore a dress again. And I used to, I used to like. Very lucky, I've got some amazing friends, and they'd phone me up and go, really sorry, will you be my bridesmaid? And I'd be like, oh bloody hell, here we go. And I'd make everything mean so much more on the day. I'd be a bit of a drama queen on the day. I can remember 3 of the weddings just standing there feeling so awful. And I couldn't even
Oh,
listen to
wow.
the vows because I was thinking people were
You're
thinking I'm
beating
fat.
it.
And I'm like,
Yeah,
"No,
yeah.
this is
That's
not."
what I have found in my work,
Yeah.
because you get a lot when you work one-on-one, right? It's a lot of what we got told between those years of 6 and 10,
Yeah.
and they're often someone like, whether it's a teacher, and it was never
Spiteful
ill-intended,
comments.
and it wasn't, and it, like, it's just a comment,
Yeah.
and it lodges in your brain. Like the one that I see really often is, I'm no good at maths.
Oh yeah, well I
Like, well, we've got
all the time.
Excel for that. We've got calculators. Like, I worked in a bank for 10 years, not being good at maths,
Yeah.
It's amazing because it's just the one comment that a teacher or a brother or a grandma or an auntie, because I had the fat thing, one comment, like,
Yeah.
and it's, and then you're still unlearning that.
Years
30,
later.
40,
Yeah. But
however
the
many
sad
years
thing is
later.
that some people don't unlearn it, and
Yeah,
that's the thing.
exactly.
And I think that's where that was what's so profound. I mean, for me with maths, I took my GCSEs and got a D, and you need to get a C to go to university or whatever.
Yeah.
Or into sixth form actually. I got a D, and then I retook it and got an E. That's how like fixed in my brain. And then I got work in a finance company, and I'd phone my dad up and go, Dad, what's 15% of 36 grand? And then I'm like, God, no, my boss is coming. And I put the phone down, and then I'd decide whether I was going to give somebody finance or not, based on the fact that my dad. So there's ways around it, right?
Yeah, you find ways around it, isn't it? Yeah. You become a high functioning better maths person.
Yeah, absolutely.
You listen to your thoughts, and then you tell yourself that's the way things are, and your body believes it.
Yeah,
And so it
absolutely.
shuts down your brain from learning the maths.
Yeah,
It shuts down your brain from getting ideas about what you should eat or exercise or things like that.
Yeah.
And it tells your body to just hold on to that, just massive, powerful messages that go on.
So is
Yeah.
that,
It's so
is that
distracting.
part of why you now have this totally holistic approach to how you work?
Yeah,
Because you've seen that emerge, and so you're like, well, I can't just teach your brain this. I've got to get a body to do it. Like,
yeah, I guess for me, so everything that Anna does is an evolution. Like there's never been a plan for the way it's to be, and I've always had an interest in the human mind, and because I've worked in the fitness industry for 20 years, you could see that people would come and they'd say, I want to run a marathon, and they'd never run before, and that's got nothing to do with their running ability. It's everything to do with their mindset, whether they achieved that marathon or not. And so I knew really early on that really it's your headspace before your brain. If your brain's on the game, we're good, and if we're not, you only have to look at the French football team to see that, like when they perform well. And it's probably the same with rugby. I'm not as much into rugby, but like the French are really, if their head's on the game, they're unstoppable, but if their heads start to drop, then the performance drops. They're the same skill, they've still got the same skill set, but the only thing that's changed is their headspace. So I always knew that I wanted to get into it. It was just how. And then I had a kind of life-changing event again back in 2013 when my dad died very suddenly, and although he was old, he still died. My mum was over here on holiday, and we had to get back, and he died the next day. So it was pretty she was pretty intense. Oh no, it's all good, but nothing prepares you for a death of a parent. And my dad and I were thick as thieves, and really super close, and I just couldn't get over it, and I couldn't get over me living here and my mum being in England, and the only person that understood was my mum and my siblings, and they were over there and I was over here. I'd only moved here 11 months prior, so I didn't really have great friends. I did have great friends, but I didn't have established friends. And I was so lucky in the community where I lived. I'll always be grateful, but I would literally, everyone would go to sleep and I'd be awake, and that's when I really learned the art of mindfulness, because prior to that I was like too busy to meditate. Too busy, I've got too much going on, and I'm always thinking
so I can't meditate because
I've got a brain that can't meditate.
It was
you don't understand, meditation's not for me.
I was too busy to meditate, and in my everything was I do quite a bit of boxing, and everything was like, oh, go hard, go home, and then all of a sudden I was like, this isn't working for me. Like I'm in the middle of the night with 2 young children, I've got a husband who's busy at work, I'm trying to build my business, And then I had an app called Headspace with Andy Piddicombe,
Yeah,
and that just changed
that was
my
your
world.
yeah.
Yeah, on
Fantastic, amazing.
every level.
So with you,
Amazing.
from a
Love it.
meditation perspective, because I'm always curious about how people get into meditation and make it actually a practice in their lives.
Yeah.
Did you, because you're a big reset button, did you just like start a really deep practice, or did you tiptoe into it?
Well, I'm the biggest overthinker going, or was, and massive empath. So overthinking was, and always very future
Yes.
pace, like what's
Yeah.
next. And then often I'm quite a perfectionist, and I'm also somebody who beats myself up a lot about everything. So if I did something to somebody once when I was 15, I'll go, oh my god, I was such a bitch, you know. And I more than carry the mistakes that I've made, and I've made a few. So meditation was really uncomfortable for me, because all of a sudden I had to like sit with
how
the
inside your brain is.
and also what was entertaining was like how like I'd be thinking about something, you know, maybe my dad dying, and then I'd be going on to, I wonder what's for breakfast, to did I buy the milk, to this and that, and I'm like, far out, like this is I'm living with this crazy person in my head, like what's that all about?
And that's where you get really glad that no one else can hear the voice say, like, they would rock me up.
You and everyone else.
It's the real practical. Yeah, so I started with 10 minutes a day with Andy Piddicombe, and then I just sort of like built from there. And then I have done some quite extreme stuff, like last year I went and did the 10-week Vipassana silent retreat, and that's entertaining to say the least.
10 days.
10 days.
Oh, 10 days.
So 10 days, you start at 6 o'clock on the Wednesday night, don't talk until the following Saturday.
Oh wow.
And
Wow.
it's brutal. 10 hours of meditation a day.
Wow.
Yeah, there's some places your brain goes in that space.
Yeah.
But what it
Incredible.
does is it teaches you that everything is manifested from our brain, and it's all a load of rubbish.
Oh, I love that. I love it. Yeah.
We're just like,
Yeah.
make that the headline.
Yeah.
Everything's manifested from our brain, and it's all
All
rubbish.
rubbish.
Yeah, but it's true.
All the stuff that we create in
Yeah.
our brain.
Yeah.
And so it's made me really come out of that going, that's not even mine, that's my mum's. That's not even mine, that's my dad's.
Yeah.
Oh right, so I really need to hold on to this belief that you know,
Yes.
I talk too much, or I'm fat, or I'm ugly,
Yeah.
or whatever it is
Yeah.
that might come into the
Yeah.
day, which you're only human, you still have those thoughts. So that's really changed and altered the way I am and the way I see life, and I don't take things as seriously anymore, because it's just
I love
life's
it.
far
It's
too
brilliant.
short.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
do you see that same transition with your clients when you're working with them as well?
It's so
Yeah.
lovely when you work one-on-one with somebody and they've been really stuck on something, and then they get unstuck. You just go, oh
That's
man,
so cool.
yeah,
So
that's
cool.
really
Yeah.
rewarding.
And are the standard patterns of being human?
Yeah, well, I've just written a book called Only Human.
Yeah.
For that reason.
Yeah. And it's just out.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Book plug.
Yeah.
We'll send the link out.
Absolutely.
The reason I called it Only Human was
Yes.
because we are only human, and
Yes.
we have very interesting wiring, and we make it mean more than we need to. And if we all understand that, and we understand that it's part of being human, then half the drama drops away, and we can be more connected. And that's what I think is
It
missing.
changes the world when we're a bit more connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brenda and I were talking the other day about your book title and saying, oh, you've chosen that book title so well, because that epitomizes everything. You know, that sums up everything. We are only human.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to be anything amazing, cranking necessarily. You know, we
It's
all
actually
have
quite
these thoughts.
messy.
It's
Just quite
great.
messy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that.
Do you find that? I find when I'm sort of working with people and I kind of go, everyone thinks that. You know, everyone thinks that. Do you find in your work that when you say everyone thinks that or feels that or experiences that, is that like permission to find some release from what you see?
Yeah, and you see it in workshops actually, which is really interesting. When you get a group of guys together, and generally in my workshops I try to be quite interactive, and I've got like a formula that I use in terms of, and I call it MENS ironically, but it's like mindset, exercise, nutrition, sleep. If you can't
mindset, exercise, nutrition, sleep. Love it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you can't expect your brain to work optimally if you're not looking after the ends part of it. And so we kind of touch on those sorts of basis, on those sorts of things. But when I start talking about like values, for example, most people don't know what their core values are. So that's like, okay, well, if you don't know what you like, why you're on this planet, or what you're doing it for, then of course you're going to not have any boundaries. Of course you're going to say yes to things when you mean no. Of course you're going to come straight home from work and take the kid and then get resentful because you don't, all of these things, like, but values can really pull you back. But what's really interesting is I'll say something that I know is a pretty standard thing, and every bloke will look around the room and you can see them all going, what, you get it too? Like, oh, but you're a CEO of a business, and hold on a minute, you run your own business, and but you think that as well. And it's like, and then all of a sudden it creates this brilliant conversation, and that's
awesome.
Because
awesome.
Again, conscious, and I don't like to stereotype, but perhaps to generalize instead. Women tend to be pretty good at talking about their feelings. So at a certain point, we tend to realize that we're not alone. But that's not true for most men. So is that in itself really helpful? Is because that's almost the first time that they've had that sense of shared emotion. For want of a better term.
It's helpful to them. Sometimes it can be quite scary for them, because it's sort of that element of like, well, what else is going on under the hood of the car? Like, what else do I didn't know this about myself, and what's going on there. And also you've got to remember, when you start doing this work, you can't unlearn it. It's a bit like Father Christmas. Once the kid knows about Father Christmas, I better be careful.
Watch our ears on replay. I'll send a disclaimer.
Once you know about Father Christmas, there's no unknowing. And sometimes ignorance is bliss, and sometimes people stay busy and in their own form of uncomfortable because it's safe there. And once we start poking around and asking questions, all of a sudden maybe friendships that they've had that they know aren't serving them, maybe they want to pull away from drinking because they know it's not right for them, but all of their mates go to the pub. All of a sudden we're now sort of saying, well, maybe the pub's not going to be the place for you. So how do we even do that when these are my mates that I've had since I was 20?
And I love hanging out with them, and I love this whole ritual that we have going on, and it's healing and those sorts of things. But then there's parts of it that obviously aren't. So it's super tricky.
And that in New Zealand is massive. I know, like culturally, when I first moved here, people had come over. We've got like an open door policy in our house, and people had come over, and I'd say, do you want a cup of tea? And they're like, have you got a beer? I'm like, shit, I've got to buy beer to have in the fridge to accommodate these people. I'm like, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. What do you need beer for? Like, because I don't really drink much anymore.
And also it's a different pattern. In the UK, you go to the pub.
Yes, exactly.
And so there's an explicit social contract there because you're meeting at the pub, so you're giving permission that it's a drinking thing. But there is something very deep in the Kiwi psyche, which is you bring some kai and you bring some drinks. And typically they not a cup of tea. Almost. So it can be. I think that's a really good takeaway for people to remember when we hear, is that it can be really confronting to learn this stuff. I'm conscious of time. And thank you so much for that feedback. I'm really glad that touching the office door on the way out and getting changed into home clothes, that's a really nice little ritual to change. So anyone that's with us live, if you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in. But is there anything that you really wish that we had asked you that we didn't, or that you'd really like to impart that someone at home takes away from this?
I just think probably the biggest thing is that we are complex. That's why we're not a dog. And we're complex creatures, and that's what makes us amazing. But also one thing I feel really passionately about is none of us know when we're going to have our last breath. We really don't, and most of us take life really seriously, myself included. I can get so caught up on, certain, for me it's always about work and how I can be better and what I can do, but we literally do not know when we're going to take our last breath. So have you told the person that you think they're great? Have you told your mum you love her recently? Have you sent the card? Have you touched base with that mate you keep meaning to phone? Like that, they're the things that matter. And if there's anything on your to-do list which you haven't done, then crack on and bring it a priority, because, and I don't mean that with a sense of urgency or pressure, but I do mean that all of a sudden we're knocking on the door of
Mm.
our next chapter, wherever
Mm.
that is.
Yeah.
And you'll be going, why didn't I just do that?
I
Or
wish I had.
Yeah.
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 All those
So
things, yeah.
that for me is my biggest message, is that we can
That's
get snowed up.
amazing message.
Yeah, I love that. Just
such a good
perhaps take some
reminder.
time out just to think, you know, if you are on your last days,
Yeah.
you know, what would you want to look back and think, yes, I did that.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yes.
so glad I did that. And what would be your biggest regrets? And put some of those things into action now.
I'm going to hazard a guess that it's quite different than what's currently top of anyone's to-do list.
Yeah.
I just, that is how we're weirdly wired as a species,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
As we
I
have
think
these
it's
to-do lists and I'll do this, but then if we actually stopped to the
Mm.
power of the pause and went, if tomorrow was my last day, would that be at the top of my to-do list?
Yeah.
And probably not. So
Mm.
go do something, like put
Mm.
something in your day
Yeah.
that is meaningful to your soul, right?
Yeah, and
Take
just
a step.
take a step back. And I mean, Sadhguru, he says it to do it every night, you know, so he's
Wow.
one of the most amazing gurus around.
Yeah.
But he says, you know, go to bed at night and say, if I don't wake up in the morning,
Yeah.
what's happened? And that's really friggin' freaky.
Wow.
It makes me kiss my husband every night,
Yeah.
you know, like it's makes you it makes you just go, okay. And like I say, I don't want to add pressure to people, but it does make you really
Think about what's
think about
important.
what is
Yeah.
important,
Yeah.
and the rest we can start to unlearn and let go, and life's a little bit easier.
What a perfect place to finish. Thank
I
you so
love
much,
that.
Anna.
That's
You're
really
incredible.
awesome. It really is. So many
yeah.
great nuggets there.
And thank you so, I'm gonna definitely be watching this back to unpick some more,
Yeah.
so I can be in learning mode rather than ask and roll questions. Thank you so much to everyone that joined us live. We will get as always the replay out and some ways to go and find Anna and get more of her goodness in your life. But thank
And
you
her
so
book.
much for joining us.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks guys, appreciate you having me on.
Right, our
Amazing.
pleasure. And I'm going to stop recording now. I started recording.